some of the challenges associated with all the discussions that we've had policy-wise in the last two panels ultimately have to be implemented, whether it's responsible AI or irresponsible AI. You need to figure some way to have the thing up. And how sustainable or energy efficient is your model or your way of approaching AI is ultimately as important, if not more important, than the financing of these large language models, small language models, what have you. And to address this sort of important policy question, we have three distinguished speakers who I want to say, not by design, but as it turns out, cover three important perspectives when it comes to sustainability and energy efficiency. And I'm certainly, for one, looking forward to hearing from them. How we'll sort of run through this panel is, ahead of the discussion today, we shared a broad list of themes that we wanted for the panelists to address. This had to do with, one, is it perhaps more energy efficient to stop talking about large language models and start thinking about context-specific, as they are called, domain-specific models? Is this some kind of, of course, can you build sustainable use cases, but also is it sustainable in the environmental sense of the term? Second is, one, what can the Global South bring to the table that is being taught differently in capitals such as India or Nairobi or other parts of the world, of the developing world, than it is in comparison to the United States, G2, or other developed economies. And so in that vein, we have a bunch of questions that we shared with themes, I should say, not questions, to the panelists. And so I invite all of them to maybe take 2 to 3 minutes to address them. With Susmitji, who's also a member of parliament, because some of the conversations that we talked about in the first half of today have to do with policy regarding oversight of AI. And since you are in that parliamentary committee on the oversight of AI, if I may request you to slightly digress, in addition to your, if you have planned remarks, to also talk about where we are with respect to the parliamentary committee discussions, that would be good. In fact, if I can sort of invite you to start the discussions, that would be great, on sustainability, and also to sort of give us very briefly, given constraints of time, on what the Parliamentary Oversight Committee is thinking about in relation to AI in India.
Thank you so much, Sukumarji. And I'd like to thank ORF, the Indian Embassy in Paris, and especially as we are gathered here about a month before the AI Global Summit takes place in Delhi, and we engage ourselves into this discourse about artificial intelligence. As a member of the Parliamentary Oversight Committee on Information Technology in India, over the last 2.5 years, we are consistently working on where do we envision AI for India. Is it going to be regulatory heavy? Is it going to be innovation driven? Where does data stand? Where does privacy stand? Where does consent stand? All of these concerns, apart from issues of sustainability, are being discussed. There are 2 quick points I want to make as preliminary points. One, that as a nation, India driving this conversation about artificial intelligence shows truly the intent of the Indian Parliament, the intent of the Indian government, and the intent of the Indian political class, that we are on the same page as far as AI is concerned. We may have diversity in our overall approaches at times, but in this team today, the 3 sessions that we saw Mr. Tiwari, senior member of parliament, former union minister who comes from the Congress party. Just in the previous session, you saw Mr. Anil Antony, a tech entrepreneur, and he's the spokesperson of the ruling party, the BJP. And I represent a regional party from the state of Odisha called as the Biju Janata Dal, and we form the third front, so to say, or a third wing, so to say, in parliament. But considering that our voices are similar and assimilated towards a synergetic approach, shows that the Indian political class, irrespective of political fault lines, has a common view that AI is important and must be harnessed for the good of people. That is why the topic AI for good, AI for people. Why people? Because 1.4 billion people, the world's largest populous country, deserves AI as one of the solutions to take it forward. I'll close with one last remark on sustainability. Resources are scarce in the global south. And that is why India is quite careful when it is taking steps towards artificial intelligence. Yes, there is a need for LLMs. There is a need for LLM that will guzzle tons of energy and tons of water. There'll be a huge ask on energy, but there are use cases where India has proven that micro LLMs and small LLMs can be used more meaningfully to address critical issues of agriculture, health, irrigation, education, skill development, and so on and so forth. So I believe that LLMs have a requirement and a need, but if the global south has to have the resources to be able to build LLMs, then it's by a long shot we will miss the mark. Rather, apart from LLMs, while we should put our money where it really is, but use cases should also be considered as stepping stones for small and micro LLMs for solving real life problems at the bottom of the pyramid. Thank you.
Thank you, Susmiti. Madam de Beauregard, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. First of all, I find it fascinating that there is a Ministry of Ecological Transition in France. Of course, it shows the government's commitment towards what is clearly something to be planning ahead of. But I wonder, based on the remarks that we've heard from our distinguished colleague from India, do some of these concerns translate to similarly to France? And do some of the questions that we sort of have been discussing over email in terms of what kind of language models should we be thinking about? Do you feel perhaps, because I assume that some of your work at least have to do with international collaboration, what can we do? And these are discussions that would be helpful in the run-up to the Impact Summit in February as well.
Thank you very much first for the invitation to this very important event, paving the way to the AI Impact Summit. I have to say that France is really honored to have been chosen as a co-chair of the working group on resiliency, innovation and efficiency, which is a topic which was really one of the topics which was at the heart of our own AI Action Summit, which was co-hosted with India in February in Paris. And you're absolutely right. It's really important for us to open the conversation beyond the safety of AI and the ethics of AI, and including other topics such as inclusion. How do we make AI work for good for the people, and how do we make sure that AI also is sustainable, that AI works for the planet and within our planet's boundary. So in France, this topic actually did not come up with AI. It came up before AI itself. So in 2021, France enacted a work plan on environment and digitalization, and enacted a specific law on reducing the environmental impact of the digital sector in 2021. So when AI really burst into the stage in 2023 with ChatGPT, it was only natural for us to make sure that AI would abide to environmental standards and sustainability.
And if I may, how is that project holding up in the, given, we have been talking about the data and the compute that this, entire technology is going to require in order to really achieve scalability and so on. How much of the mission of the ministry, if I can call it that, has been now consumed by AI-centric projects?
So we are going it one step after the other. First, we want to make sure that AI is showing like real progress and can also like be used not only by big player but also by SMEs and also by like smaller smaller cities and not only by big cities. So in 2003, 2004, we actually, within our national strategy for AI, had a specific program which we dedicated 40 million to this euros to this program to select 12 pilot projects, specifically targeting environmental project and using what we call like frugal AI. So making sure that the AI models which are used for this specific pilot project will have a reduced environmental footprint. And actually like we've just last year selected the last project, but in the first batch of project we're already like seeing a real world application. So one small city outside of Paris called Noisy-le-Grand, it's really small compared to like Indian standard, it's 70,000 people. And so they've implemented AI, which is not an LLM, because it's also a point that we need to make. AI, it does not equal to LLM. And there is a lot of very efficient AI model, like super useful in terms of real life problems, solving real life problems that are not as energy consuming. And even like we're talking about LLM, but small language model and micro language model, when they are trained to solve like specific topics, are actually like more accurate and better than a big LLM. But to come back to this project, so they've been using AI to reduce the energy use in their public building. And after only like 18 months, it comes up to 1.2 million euros of economy, of savings, and 20% less use of energy within their public building.
Interesting. And for a town of 70,000, that is significant in terms of numbers and resources. Thank you. Let me now turn to Siddharth Singh. Siddharth, you are co-leading a work stream on this very topic for a prominent international organization. And, I know we have the themes for discussion, but if you, in addition to that, could also tell us how is the IEA thinking about this? Is there, given that, the professional competency of the organization is more towards the energy side, and therefore you are in a better position than all of us to tell us about the consumption bit, and whether there has been a way of thinking about AI and energy, and whether that has changed, or whether it has consistently been the same in terms of sustainability.
Thank you, Arun, and thanks to ORF and the Indian Embassy for having me here. It's absolute pleasure and honor to share the stage with Sashmit ji and my dear colleague Haren, who we are in touch, on an occasional basis. So, at the International Energy Agency, our role is to advise governments and the broader community of energy companies and investors on what are the energy security risks. How do we plan for the future? How do we ensure that multiple goals of governments are met, and these goals, to the benefit of the people, which includes ensuring energy is affordable, which includes energy being sustainable, which includes the supply chains of energy being secure, so people don't find their energy supply being disrupted, for example. Now, in our analysis and our engagement over the years, we realize that AI has indeed come up as a very sharp vector which could fundamentally transform things. And we found that there were two broad conversations that were happening depending on who you talk with, right? So on the one side were people who were claiming or asking questions. This is back in the day. This is before we had numbers and quantifications. The questions that were being asked is, could AI single-handedly derail our energy transitions and our energy security goals? Will the energy demand coming from AI be so much that it could overwhelm the ability of energy companies to even provide that electricity or energy? On the other side were the optimists and often tech companies that were saying that AI could single-handedly solve all these problems. It could solve the issue of climate change. It could solve the issue of various other broad challenges that humanity faces. And that's where we come in. And our role was to firstly bring some quantification to these two broad positions, and to really understand firstly what is the energy consumption coming from AI. Secondly, to what extent can AI actually transform the energy sector? And what are the barriers? What do we need to do to ensure that the good things come out and the bad things are kept at bay? So maybe I can give you a flavor of the analysis that we came up with. So firstly, just to set the kind of benchmark here, data centers globally last year consumed nearly 500 terawatt hours of electricity, which is, for context, about 1.5% of global electricity, right? This at the global level is expected to double by the end of this decade, which means that by 2030, all data centers globally would be consuming as much electricity as Japan as a country does today. Japan is one of the largest economies of the world, of course. Now, having said that, at the global level, it may seem like these numbers are small. What is 1.5%? And in 2030, what is 3%? So therefore, we need to look at the local challenges that arise due to data centers. A typical AI-focused data center today consumes as much electricity as is consumed by 100,000 households or 1 lakh households. The largest data center under construction, which caters to artificial intelligence, could consume as much as 3 million households or 30 lakh households. That is quite a radical jump. And therefore, we are talking about infrastructure that consumes energy that comes up overnight. Within 18 months, you have something as large as a city in terms of electricity consumption coming onto the grid. So this can overwhelm the local grid. It can cause a lot of challenges. We find in Texas, just one state in the United States, the pipeline for new projects is 180 gigawatts. To put that in context, the global data center capacity is 100 gigawatts today. So just in one state, in one place, you have a tripling of the global existing capacity that is being requested by the grid operator. So the energy system cannot possibly meet that kind of demand.
Can I ask you, how much of this is being over-indexed on what the United States and China are doing? Or is it happening secularly across countries, big and small, developing and developing?
That's a very good question, because indeed, we find that data center pipeline, so even existing, but pipeline as in everything that's under construction and off the ground, 85% of it comes from only 3 parts of the world. So 85% of it is either in the United States, or in China, or in Western Europe. And so therefore, this is where the challenge is kind of concentrated. But having said that, there are new hubs that are emerging, including in India. We have read the headlines of a big Google data center coming up in Vizag, Visakhapatnam in India. Currently, the biggest hub of data centers in India is in Mumbai. And in Mumbai, the collection of data centers together consume as much electricity as 20 lakh households. So that already exists today. So this is a big challenge that India's grid already has to kind of face. But this is true in other parts of the world as well, in Africa and in Southeast Asia. So it's a big challenge.
So tell us something. If, as the IEA now, I mean, of course, speaking in your personal capacity, if you are confronted with a set of policy choices on the one hand that allow you to potentially consume less energy as a state, how do you sell that to the government that is obviously going to be big on AI? And no country in the world today is going to say we don't want AI, right? So how do you sell that policy choice?
I think, obviously countries have to manage, or governments rather have to manage various stakeholders. The AI and the tech sector stakeholders are important, but they're not the only ones. I think countries have begun to see if there are issues that are, challenges to the grid, where, for example, a distribution company or a grid operator has to put in a lot of investment, sometimes in the billions of dollars, to set up new transmission lines. But they're not sure if the tech companies are over demanding, whether that kind of demand will actually materialize. It takes 10 or 15 years for this kind of infrastructure to be built. But on the data center side, it can be as little as 18 months or 12 months. So there's a big mismatch. And I think governments kind of really need to, they already are seeing that they cannot blindly just meet all the demand coming from the tech sector. There has to be a balance. There has to be an understanding of the implications of that on other things. Just yesterday or day before yesterday, Microsoft announced that it will work with the government of the United States to ensure that there is no impact on affordability, because there were concerns that data centers are causing prices of electricity to go up, which impact households. So these are the kinds of different stakeholders that the governments will need to manage.
Thanks. Following through from this, Smithji, also from following from what Siddharth and Elaine have been talking about, I really don't envy your position as a policymaker, and especially as a policymaker from Odisha. I mean, so for the uninitiated, I think my colleague from ORF Shubh already mentioned that Odisha has had a history of adverse weather incidents, especially cyclones. But what people don't realize is also this is a state that has done incredibly well to counter those adverse events through planning over the last 2 decades or so. Now, from one perspective, AI could potentially even better improve your planning and contingency management for those adverse weather events, especially cyclones. But if a big company or a philanthropic foundation were to come to your state and say, look, this is the plan, but we need this giant data center in the state in order to help, among other things, you are planning for adverse weather events, how would you, what factors would influence your decision-making calculus in that kind of a scenario?
Sukumarji, it's a very tough call. The tough call is, I come from the state of Odisha, which has probably got the second largest coal deposits of India. And today we are the largest producer of coal. So on one hand would be artificial intelligence and a data center which would harness tremendous amounts of value for my state and for nearby states. On the other hand, I would be quite conscious that as a nation, we have made a commitment by 2050, we will be carbon net zero. And at this point of time, in India, though solar energy globally, the prices have been coming down. In India, the solar energy prices haven't really come to that position where the cheaper thermal coal that is easily available seems like less of a choice and more is solar. So therefore, for a developing country like India, sustainability is important, but the trade-off between sustainability versus development is a very tough call. Having said that, when we look at the 3 major resource centers where we find data centers or AI really moving fast, China, US, and Western Europe, vis-a-vis Global South, the resources there that they have been able to generate has happened over a period of time. India was just about getting there. And we can still get there. But this increased demand for energy by data centers and AI platforms is going to surely have an impact on the supply chain and might also disrupt, in my opinion, I do not know. But going forward, if we are going to be very bullish on it and we want to really invest heavily, it might have an impact on our carbon expectations and commitments. That is one. Second, yes, we must work on use cases, small LLMs. I mean, you spoke about Odisha, my state. A state in 1999, we were forced, just for context I'm giving you. A state in 1999, there was a super cyclone and 10,000 people of my state were washed away into the sea. To a state which again faced a cyclone of very high proportions in 2012 called as Phylin, and there was 0 casualty. And the United Nations felicitated the state of Odisha as being a state which probably has really harnessed how disaster management needs to be done on coastal resilience. So how we have been able to do over a period of time, which has been harnessed now, is again been one of the use cases of small LLMs and micro LLMs. So therefore, to close my conversation on this specific aspect, I believe if there is a trade-off between sustainability for our India today, vis-a-vis artificial intelligence, energy requirements, versus probably sustainability, I would err on the side of development. It's a tough call. Maybe it's a very, it wouldn't make the headlines, or it might make the headlines for the wrong reasons. But given that if I don't do that, somebody else going to do it anyway. And those who are doing it are not worried about sustainability anyway. So does the global south, is the responsibility of the global south to uphold sustainability? What about the global north? What about China? Do we only have the responsibility? We never started the chlorofluorocarbons. We were never responsible for the industrial revolution that brought about the largest climate changes or the warming of the climate. But we are the people who are always expected to do our bit and the heavy lifting for the errors and the mistakes that have been done by others. So therefore, many a times as a policy maker, it is heavy on me to say, should I and my people always be doing the heavy lifting, even on this situation where probably artificial intelligence might again give a go-by? Probably because I'm more focused on sustainability, whereas those who have already been there and doing it are less focused. So I think it's a moral issue, it's a loaded issue, it's an ethical issue, but given a condition, if you were to say, is it a A or a B, decisively, I would go on the side of development, but not reckless development, where sustainability is not done with closed eyes, but with a calculated understanding.
Thank you for answering that in a very forthright manner. And I'm sure you echo the views of many parliamentarians and legislators from across the global south who would, I think, say it, frame it at least in the same terms as you. Thank you again. Elaine, one of the things that you mentioned was this bit about pilots that the ministry has supported. And I want to share an interesting anecdote from our conversations in Geneva, where this Indian delegation was prior to coming to Paris. And we had this sort of discussion on the importance of having pilot projects on use cases that are relevant to the global south, not specifically in the domain that we are talking about. But in that context, someone said that AI is fast turning into the graveyard of pilots, where you have multiple pilot projects which do not, in some cases, are just not scalable at all. And even if they have some glimpses of potential with respect to scalability, there's no financing model that is sustainable in that case, either from the government or through philanthropic agencies or raising money from capital markets, which pilots are obviously in no position to do. How is France tackling this in the domain that you work on?
That's a very good question, and we don't want to repeat the error of the past. Like during the first internet era, where we see like so many companies bursting into flames. So when we started this pilot project initiative, we took two commitments, like two very strong commitments. The first one was, as I said, to use frugal AI model. So by one, you're already like reducing the cost, the financial and environmental cost of the AI that you're using. You're ensuring that the AI model that will be selected to solve the problem is the right one. And actually, like building on this, we've developed the first, it was a first world framework for frugal AI. Because obviously, like the people who were supposed to do the project came to us and say, okay, give us some guidance about what frugal AI means. Exactly. So in 2024, after 3 months of intense work with the whole ecosystem, over like 100 people, coming from the big tech, from startup, from the research, from the public sector, we came up with these guidelines that are also like published in English. And so on top of like having a methodology to calculate the environmental impact of the AI model that you're using and providing some tools so you can use to calculate this impact, we also come up with like good practice on how to reduce the environmental impact of your AI model. Like the first question, which seems like super obvious, but sometimes most of the people do not ask this question because like AI is becoming such a fad that do you need AI to do this? But another question, which is like trickier to answer, is that you've set your goal here, but what about, do you really need to get the goal here? will you be able to achieve the same of like overall results if your goal, rather than being here, would be there? And by being there, you might not need to use AI. So it's really like a tricky analysis to be done, but that's really at the core of this AI framework. Of course, if the answer is yes, I do need AI, then you have you go through a whole set of guidelines to help you like reduce the environmental impact of the AI. So that was like the first commitment. The second commitment is that we ask each pilot project to come up with a plan to make sure that their pilot project will be replicatable. And so we are helping them throughout the 2 years that we are helping them put forward the pilot and developing them, to also come up with strategies to ensure that the pilot will be replicable. So that's like the two strong commitments. And the last one would be like on our within our national adaptation plan, we've also decided to pilot AI project for adaptation to climate change. But we made this pilot project smaller, so the subsidy that we get is like much smaller, and it's really targeted to like small cities in France to be able to pilot smaller projects that are also easier to replicate more widely.
That's actually a useful way to, but I don't know the feasibility of asking an AI entrepreneur whether you really need AI for this is maybe a bridge too far in some places, but it is actually, and I'm glad the government is provoking the community, the startup community to think in those terms. I want to say thanks to the panelists for providing, I really wish there was more time to sort of dig deep into some of the nuggets that you have left behind, but that is enough and more food for thought for us as we continue this discussion on AI and sustainability. Thank you once again for your enriching inputs, and I hope you have a good rest of the evening. Thanks.